What is perspective? Put most simply, perspective is how something looks from a particular viewing point. Perspective does not just apply to buildings, it applies to anything that we can observe. Exactly how something appears to me will change if I change where I stand when I'm looking at it. In some ways, it seems most obvious when applied to architecture. Let me show you really quickly exactly what sort of changes I'm talking about.
If we look at an object viewed straight on from the front, it looks different to how it looks if we move slightly our position and view it just a bit more from one side. The appearance of our object changes yet again if we simply move just a bit closer towards it. In fact, any way we change our position from which we view an object changes the way the object looks to us, even if we move above the object, as in this case. How something looks to us always depends on where we're looking at it from, and this is perspective.
And here's a little secret. If we always draw from life or from looking at a reference photo, we don't really need to understand perspective at all. What we need to do is draw exactly what we see. Although for various reasons that I talk about in other videos, that's not always as easy or as straightforward as it sounds. And in my experience, if we understand how perspective works, it will help us to observe what's in front of us or our reference photo more accurately. And that then will help me draw more accurately. If we draw from our imagination, if we create buildings and structures that have never really existed before, then probably an understanding of perspective is vital. So let's start. Because perspective changes as where we view an object from changes, where our eyes are is clearly very important. Eye level really has nothing to do, except coincidentally, with the eye level of anyone in the scene. It's the eye level of the person observing the scene, or more often the case, with the camera. So where is the camera level in this scene? The key thing to realize is that the eye level will be where our horizontal lines actually appear to be horizontal. What do I mean? If we look at this Paris street scene, there are lots of horizontal lines. Now, if we were directly opposite these buildings looking at them, these lines would all be horizontal. But they're not. They angle. The thing about eye level is that at the eye level, the line is horizontal. And in this case, it's somewhere about here. So if we just get rid of all these for a sec, and we're looking to see with all these lines, we can see the angles are different and change. Where's the horizontal line? Well, we can see that this line is slightly tilting downwards, and the line below it is pretty horizontal. The one below it is slightly tilting upwards. So in fact, this line here is eye level. This is the level my camera was at when I took this photo. And then the most important thing to remember is that as you go above eye level, the angle of the lines increases. The angle gets greater and greater the higher the lines are above eye level. They might be parallel in real life, but they're not parallel in their perspective. And exactly the same thing happens below eye level. The angle increases, but in the opposite direction. And there's another really obvious thing, isn't there? The lines all converge at a point on the eye level, and we call that point the vanishing point, because it's the point where all the perspectives disappear in the distance, which is why this line is sometimes called the horizon line as well. But I don't like to use it because the horizon also can mean something else, which doesn't have to be the same as the horizon in perspective. The reason why it's so important to find
eye level is because then we can start to see how much the lines angle as they move up away from eye level. Mostly, the more extreme angles are as the perspective lines move upwards, because usually we're on the ground looking up towards things more. But sometimes, as in this case, there are just as many perspective lines angling more and more in a downwards direction from eye level as well. Every scene is different. But once we find eye level, it's easier to observe what's happening with these perspective lines. And if I've observed them accurately, I now have a great chance to draw them accurately. So let's look at some of those other examples. How do we work out eye level here? This is eye level really according to where everyone's eyes are. But sometimes we're better off looking at our architecture first and looking to see what angles do we have in the building. By lining up the various parts of architecture, we can see that these lines are angling upwards, so therefore they are above eye level. And we can see that these lines down here are angling downwards in the opposite direction, so they're going to be below eye level. Eye level is going to be somewhere between these two lines. If we take those away for a sec, and again we look at our architecture, I can see that if I align the lanterns of these lampposts, it angles slightly up. So the line's going to be below those. So it's going to be here. So this is eye level. And we can see that this is actually pretty close to everyone's eye level. And that's because I was standing on something when I took this photo. And this is an example then where most of the perspective lines are above eye level. There are very few beneath it. But we can also see that they still converge on the eye level. If we look at this scene, this is flat ground. There is only one person here standing on the flat ground that I am standing on when I take this photo, and that's this figure here. This gentleman is sitting down. These people are all sitting down, and these people who are standing are not standing on the same ground level as I am, but they're actually standing on the steps of this church on the outskirts of Paris. We could fairly confidently say that eye level is going to be about here if I am the same height as this gentleman. And what we can see is when we look at the angles that we have as they go higher than eye level, in fact, they increase. And we can see that although it's off the page, that they will meet on our eye level. And if we go below eye level, there aren't as many lines and the angle is much more shallow. But we can see they will all end up meeting on the eye level just off the page. So what about our interior scene? Is this more difficult somehow? In fact, this is probably the easiest. We can see there are 4 figures here in the front portico area of the Vienna State Opera House. When I took this photo, I'm standing on the same level ground. My eye level is approximately going to be the same as their eye level. And if we're looking for the horizontal line, if we're looking for where all the architectural elements that align in life form a horizontal line in this scene, we can see quite easily that it's at the same place where all the heads are, because that's my eye level as well. And to make it even easier, there is a very convenient ridge line along here, which is the base of the columns, and it's a decorative band in the wall, and there are more columns on the right hand side that also have this platform that they sit on. And we can see that at eye level, the architectural alignment of the perspective is horizontal. If we were to align the architectural details, there's a decoration in the center of those columns there that line up in life. Quite clearly there's the tops of these columns here clearly align up in real life. If we go to the right hand side, there's a very clear ridge here that lines up. And what about on our ceiling? There is a very clear line that runs right through the top of our ceiling. And in fact, we can see that all of these perspective lines line up on the same point on our eye level.
If we go below eye level, we see exactly the same thing. There are lots of lines we can align with below eye level. There are these architectural ones just under eye level, but there are also patterns that follow perspective pattern. And we get this wonderful perspective starburst, don't we? This is known as one-point perspective because all of the perspective lines come back to just one point on the eye level. And we see this most commonly in interior scenes or in outdoor scenes where we're looking straight down a long street or something similar, where both sides of the road seem to meet at a point in the far distance. This scene we looked at earlier is known as two-point perspective because we put our eye level in and we have a perspective point that we looked at where if we align all the vertical features of the architecture, they all meet at a point on the eye level. But we could have chosen another direction of lines because there was a direction of lines going off to the left. Now the angle of this wall to us is not as steep as the angle of the front wall. And so these perspective lines aren't as extreme, which means they won't meet eye level until quite a long way further to the left of our page. But it's important to see that they're there. So in this scene, we have a vanishing point off to the right and we have a vanishing point of our perspective lines off to the left. So this is what's known as two-point perspective because there are two vanishing points. And if we look at our third example and we put our eye level in, we can see again that there's a clear vanishing point off the page to the right. We also can now recognize, if we didn't see it before, that there is another clear vanishing point, angles off to the left. However, because this is a very tall building and we are low down looking up, there is a further vanishing point that goes upwards. We can see that if these two lines were continued, they would meet. And this is the effect we get when we stand at the ground and look up at a tall skyscraper. And in fact, there is a second eye level here. There is a vertical eye level, as I like to call it, where instead of having a horizontal perspective line, we have a vertical perspective line. And when you're looking at a scene in real life, it's right in front of you. But when you're looking at a photo, the photo has quite possibly, even probably been cropped, which shifts where it is. So the, in effect, straight ahead point could be to one side of the photo. The only way really to know where it is to look and say, where is the true vertical line? And we can see that it's approximately where the yellow line is here. And so this, of course, is three-point perspective because I have three vanishing points. And this vertical perspective works just the same as when it was on the side. The angles increase as they move away from the vertical perspective line to the left or to the right. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. If you've got to this point and you haven't subscribed to my channel, then please hit the subscribe button and hit notifications so you know when I post a new video. It's important to remember when we draw from life or from photos that perspective rules don't tell us what we have to do. They don't tell us what we have to draw, but rather they describe what we are going to see happening in some way in what's in front of us or in our reference photo. So if we understand the way perspective rules work, they help us to see more clearly what's in front of us. And so the rules of perspective are actually a tremendous help, tremendous opportunity to let us observe our reference more easily, more carefully. And because I'm a great believer that our biggest problem in drawing is that we draw before we've seen and understood what's in front of us properly, then I'm obviously a big fan of understanding perspective, understanding how the patterns of things change. So I hope this has been helpful, and I use this every time I draw.